Okay, here I am. Going to show you how to get these drips of water, how I did these. Basically, water is going to reflect everything that is around it. So I'm using some Ultramarine Blue and a little bit of crimson, all the colors you see on the palette. I'll put them in the description. Grabbing some of those shadow colors first with a little bit of white in them. Just carefully with my Filbert brush, pulling them down and stopping where I think the drips would accumulate. Now and then the drops will get heavy and they will accumulate as they all pour down together. If you ever watch water, you really have to observe how water moves. Okay, and pinched my brush off. Grab a little bit of ultramarine blue with a touch of crimson and some white. Pulling that around, grabbing my shadow colors so that they will show against that light background. And pushing that brush up into the white a little more so that I can get some light on those drips. Now I've got some water splashing at the bottom there, and I noticed that I didn't hit my mark, so I'm just going to improvise, cause another little splash, because I will be bringing down some more water to hit that other splash, causing little ripples in the water. And just pinching off my brush each time to keep that brush nice and flat, because you don't want it to be frayed out or it's not going to make a nice clean mark. Now see how I'm dripping that water. It's going to be coming down the antlers because he's dipped his head in the water. They put their heads way down into the water and it just causes a waterfall to come off those antlers right off at the first, when they first bring their head up out of the water. So here the water is just leftover water on his antlers, basically. Gosh, these animals are so powerful. Now I'm adding some light onto those drips against those shadows. Just kind of trickling it down, just like water would trickle down anywhere. The more water coming off an object, the more or less trickles there'll be, of course. Now I'm causing a little bit of splash in the water itself there. The light's catching in from behind him, so I'm going to add just more light. Always pinching my brush off. Now I'm going to come over here on the other side. Again, starting with more of a light shadow, kind of picking up everything as I go. More of the blues and crimsons to get that shadow first. Kind of squiggling my brush, bringing a pattern of water down. A little more white now to cause reflections. The water's coming from a couple sides of his antlers, so I'm making that V at the top. Now I'm just kind of letting the water decide where it's going to hit. And now and then I add a little bit of the golds and yellows to pick up some of those reflections in the background. Excuse me. Every time I get to talking, I start having to clear my throat. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit more shadow in there. Just looking to see where I'm going with the water. Pinching off my brush. Whenever you see my hand go down, I'm usually pinching my brush off to get it nice and flat, so I can get a nice And I'm barely picking up that color on the tip of the brush, just a little bit to get a nice bright white for reflections to come around those drips, leaving some shadow in the middle. And every now and then just touching a little light, just like I did over on the right hand side. Bring it in several different colors, letting the water have a transparency through it, so some of that background is showing through that water cascading off. Grabbing a little gold just to pull that color through a little bit more from the background. Getting that transparent look, very little paint, very lightly touching. Get a little shadow there to pick up that background wave. See how I stop? Or that little ripple in the water in the background, so it reflects through that sheet of water at the top of the... Come back down there and add some more light highlights. Just continuing to pick up more paint. Continuing to pick up paint every time, because that white's going to just get pulled right off. See how that brings out some of those nice highlights as the water moves, coming around those shadows to create a form of splash. Just get a little more light, adding light. Always thinking about what the water is reflecting from the colors around it. Don't want to add too much of the golds down in here because mostly it's the shadows from the moose in the water that are reflecting. Right there, maybe a little gold. Or the water's coming through under his neck. Over here, there'll be more of the golds reflecting from the background again. Always bringing that little highlight at the tip of the drip where the water jets out. It causes little drips. Little tiny ones here and there. Because the water is just kind of the rest of the water that's left on his antlers after he's already picked up his head are coming off. Not a huge amount, so it's not causing a lot of disturbance in the water itself. Now, if he had just picked up his head, there would be a lot more gush of water coming off. Now I'm going to come up and just kind of touch up these shadows. A little bit more right up underneath the antlers, because there's going to be a little shadow coming from the antlers right at the top. A little bit more ultramarine blue to reflect from underneath his antlers. I just kind of dribble it down. Pull that over a little bit. Excuse me. Now I'm carefully I just think about where things will be. Where the shadows, where the water is thicker, it's going to create more shadow. A little more up top where his antlers are. And I pull that water across the antlers because it's constantly just working that shadow. Let me know what you're getting out of these videos and leave comments below, and let me know what you'd like to learn how to paint more of. I could create more videos accordingly. Be sure to subscribe and share and like and all that good stuff. And if you want to be notified, just hit the bell. When there's new videos out, you'll know because you hit that bell. Ooh, I'm really loving this water coming off. It's beautiful. Beautiful. These moose are so amazing to watch when they're foraging around in the water. They just stick their whole entire head down in there, and their ears have a certain kind of flap to them that it keeps the water from going inside their ears. Really cool. Sometimes you'll see them shake their heads in case something gets in there. And their noses, see how their nostrils have that big flap? That's to keep the water from getting down inside their noses too. God made them amazing just for these purposes. Now I'm just kind of touching where I know the drips are dripping, where the light's going to catch them more, where the water is thicker. And they kind of stop and everything. The water sort of pools up. Now I'm just going to come around and touch up on all my shadows, continuing to get that nice contrast. Little touches. I love this little brush. This little Filbert flat tip. It's flat, but it's got a round tip. It's called a Filbert. Kind of pushing that paintbrush up into the paint. And sometimes if I go up onto that pile of white, I just touch the tip of the paintbrush on there. Pulling that across. Always giving it more and more and more. However much I think that water is going to cause a splash at the bottom, I'll continue to add a little wakes because it's disturbed the water below, and it's going to cause little miniature wakes. And every time I pick up that blue and white, I'm picking up a slight bit of yellow and gold because it's kind of right there. So much fun doing water. And eyes, of course. I love it all. I'll teach you how to do fur. I have these amazing little brushes to do fur. I'll have to show you some tricks. Pretty soon I'm going to start dribbling that water off his nose, because his nose has gathered water too. Here we go. As I was doing the painting, I thought, something's missing. Oh, the water on his nose. That's right, his nose would have gotten in the water. So let's drip some water off his nose. Pulling those nice light colors, little touch of blue for shadow. Love that ultramarine blue. Beautiful color. Just kind of going slow. Go slow and figure out where things will be. How that water comes down. Oh, one of my chickens is out there chirping. I don't know if you can hear her. He was singing a song outside my window. I love my chickens. Oh, it's so pretty. They give me eggs. Okay, now that water's going to come across the nose. It's kind of dripping off the nose the same way it was on the antlers. And then I'm going to bring in shadows as I go. Highlights, shadows. Love it. Love this moose. He is a gorgeous guy. I've seen him bigger. The photographs I used, he didn't have quite as big a rack, so I gave him a little bit more beefy antlers. Love seeing them in the water. I saw a record bull once in Glacier. He was amazing. I did paint a picture of him if you want to see him. He's on my website. It's called Heavy Shield Warrior. Named him after the Indians had named the mountain Heavy Shield that I saw. And then that matched up with the moose's big shield. And he's a warrior, so massive and powerful. Hence the name, Heavy Shield Warrior. Continuing to pick that paint up. Keep that brush nice and flat. That's why I like to pinch my brushes off in my paper towel. Just pull the brush through the paper towel, keeping in form with the brush itself. You don't want to go against the flat of the brush or you'll wreck your brush. Pinching my brush off again every time I disappear with it. Working that paint. Love these paints. Walnut oil is my favorite medium. And these paints do not smell. And I never use turpentine. Ugh, gives me a headache. Very toxic. These are special paint that I use. And I wash my brushes out with soap and water. Here I've got my liner brush now because I want to get a finer, distinctive line there. Always going slow. Really figuring out where things will be, taking my time. Just now and then adding a little highlight where I think it might need a little more, where the light might be coming through and catching. You got to figure out where the shadows will be falling, you know, where his head, because that rack, that antler is going to come towards you more, so it will catch more of that backlighting. And then his head is kind of shadowing right in here. So it won't be as much light, but just a little bit, maybe a little gold will start picking up in there from the shadow of his nose, because all the light is coming from behind the moose off to the left slightly. Always got to figure out where your light source is. I love adding highlights. Gorgeous. Isn't this fun? So much fun. I just love watching it. Watching it come to fruition. I will watch my videos over and over again, and my heart just flutters with happiness, just watching with the music, how it just makes me feel so happy to watch this amazing experience. course, I did this ahead of time and I made a time lapse for you out of it. And then I decided, wait a minute, I could make a short tutorial on how I did these drips of water. So I hope this is helping you and maybe something you might want to paint. It will help you in waterfalls, just practicing how to make water move and how it reflects light. So I'm doing this voiceover for you. Try to explain to you what I'm doing. Adding those nice shadows down in there. Just look around and see how the light is catching things, and maybe it's gonna reflect a little down in there. Just about, oh yeah, little drips, little movements in the water. Never really solid lines, not much anyway. Always kind of bouncing my brush around. Barely touching. Not too much paint. Little shadow color in there. Isn't that just beautiful? It's fun just to watch to see how it is done so that you can practice. So happy that you joined me on this, and I will see you in the next video.